King's honor, friend.
Work, work.
Ah, yes. Faction imbalance.
That is what we're here to talk about today. We have the Hall of Fame for the tier so far. It is not yet filled up on the Horde side, but it's getting close, and probably in the next reset or two, we're going to see this thing fill all the way up. Right now, we have 54 guilds on the lineup, so maybe 2 more weeks before this fills all the way up. But
And if the Hall of Fame was to close today for Horde, we would have basically 11 alliance guilds be in their Hall of Fame at about the same time that there is 100 Horde guilds inside of theirs.
right, yeah. So right now there's 6 alliance to the 54 horde that have finished clearing the raid, which is the biggest imbalance I've ever seen. It's not that much bigger than in previous tiers, but it is certainly a little bit bigger. Some of the heavy hitters that previously showed up on this alliance side have swapped over to the horde side, and that's been a process that has been going on slowly and steadily. It's been eroding ever since the last my 4 years. Over the last 4 years, there's been this slow movement of a couple of alliance guilds every tier. Most recently, we've seen guilds like Club Camel, used to be near the top of the alliance side or at the top of the alliance side. Now over here on the horde side as well. Um,
Yeah. And
yeah,
and for as a point of reference, like you said, it's been a slow process over the last 4 years or so. In Nighthold, 27 out of the top 100 guilds in the world were alliance, and now we're at 10. So it's been one of those things that it was kind of imbalanced for a while. Tuma Sargeras happened. That is
right.
attributed to most people as like the catalyst for this kind of thing. But it's even then been a very slow bleed ever since Nighthold, pretty much.
Yeah, so you picked the Nighthold because that was the tier before the Great Goblining of Tomb of Sargeras, which the last boss fight of that, Kill Jaden, 3 of the 12 classes in the game were pretty big trouble if they didn't have Goblin Jump. Death Knights, Priests, Shamans, right? Were all just getting lobbed off the edge, and
Yep.
Goblin Jump back on was really valuable on that fight. So you saw a huge shift then, and since then, the imbalance in most regions has been enough that it's kind of been dragging the good players, like the top players, over towards where the top guilds are, right? And that process just compounds. It's a feedback loop that has been going and going, and the Hall of Fame, that the 2 separate Hall of Fames were an attempt to reduce this imbalance, right? This is an attempt to make it there be incentive to be alliance, right? Because if the alliance Hall of Fame fills up more slowly, then that means you could be a guild that kills the boss in 2 months and still get the Fame Slayer title as alliance, but you wouldn't as horde, right? And so that, in theory, is supposed to pull people towards alliance, but in practice, just being where the guilds are has been a much more powerful pull.
That's a good way to kill your guild because the social dynamics and the social structure of like WoW. I mean, not even just like the raiding community at large, but also like doing Mythic Plus with your friends, doing other content, rated arena with your friends, just being on like the same faction as your people that you enjoy playing the game with is a much more enticing and enjoyable endeavor to the point where all of the raiders that I know on NA are Horde, and basically all of the top guilds on NA also Horde.
Yeah, playing with your friends like that is something that the people swapping from alliance to horde often are giving up some of that. It's a big, pull away from where your current friend groups are, but over on the horde side there's much more like pugs you can do of high mythic plus, for instance. It's a completely different scene in the group finder between the two. PvP is a little better. PvP, there's more people playing like high level PvP alliance side.
Yeah,
Because one thing we haven't talked about too much, the racials are actually really well balanced for PvE outside of Goblin. Goblin has edged ahead in Tomb of Sargeras, and actually this tier again, it's been a pretty good tier for Goblin. Mythic Painsmith in particular, there's that wall of spikes. If you've done Painsmith on normal and heroic, there's the walls of spikes that come at you in the intermission. They always have a gap in them. On Mythic, there's a set that does not have a gap in it, and you need to jump off and goblin jump back on if you're caught in the position of being like a priest that isn't Night Fae or Venthyr, right? And you're just like, whoop.
funnily enough, you remember those classes that you talked about earlier? Priest, Shaman, Death
DK.
Knight? Again, same ones that need to be Goblin for Painsmith. Void Elf, though, is kind of enticing, but Shaman can't be Void Elf, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Shaman can be Night Fae or Venthyr to get around it, depending on which spec they're playing. But it is still, a lot of shaman are necrolords, and there's that
Yeah.
new sweet Kyrian build that is popping up as well. So yeah, it's tough out there for that reason, but I don't think the racials have the blame here. I think it is just this kind of,
Yes.
there's just the huge pull towards being on the faction where you can play with all the other people, right? Once there is a faction that has come this far ahead in terms of population, it's really hard to justify rolling up or being a guild on the other side when you have the
Yeah.
choice.
And I mean, funnily enough, the inverse of that is present on OCE.
True.
Almost all of OCE is very alliance favored. A lot of the top reading guilds are on Frostmourne, on alliance, and I mean, it's not super close for that region at large. Russia and China have like not a terrible split between Horde and Alliance. Russia 6 out of their top 20 guilds are all Alliance. China 3 out of their top 20 are Alliance, which is better than EU and NA. But at the same time, I mean,
mean,
that's not a great split. It's not 50-50.
yeah, I think that goes to show just how big the problem is, though, for like, English speaking Europe and North America. Because of the Alliance Hall of Fame we have right now, honestly, Copium, Ethical, those are Oceanic guilds. Sloth, that's a Spanish guild, I believe. And then the 2 Chinese guilds on there. So of the 6 guilds on the Alliance Hall of Fame, none of them are from English speaking Europe or North America, which is
Wait,
crazy, right?
I just started scrolling through something. There are 0 Horde guilds on OCE that have killed mythic bosses.
So that is the
0.
converse, yeah. So I guess that shows that it's less a problem of like the Horde or the Alliance in specifics, and more a problem of like when there are 2 factions in a game that has so heavily moved into this sort of community based and friend group based system. It's really hard for there to be like a stable equilibrium at anything other than like 100-0, right? And if it's 50-50, it's kind of perfectly balanced on a knife's edge, and maybe it can hold there for a bit. But as soon as it gets to 60-40, it is teetering the rest of the way to 100-0 over the next couple of years, like we are seeing with this.
Happened. Yeah, I mean, Nighthold, it was kind of chill. Like, you could be Alliance. I was Alliance at that point. And then it was just like after Tomb, it was like, all right, there was a big exile and everybody was just gone. You're like, all right, well, gotta go. BRB.
So it's an interesting question. It does have ramifications for a lot of players as well, because this ties into the Hall of Fame. We could see, for instance, the Horde Hall of Fame for Castle Nathria closed on the 2nd of February of this year, while only 12 slots had been claimed on the Alliance side. And that meant that we were waiting for Cross-Realm Mythic for another like month and a half. Which is relevant for, like, a lot of people going and doing a Mythic Terror group hug for your alts is good, free, easy gear in a lot of cases, and doing that kind of thing cross-realm is a really nice way to gear up your alts that you're going to be waiting on doing, or even playing with your friends from other servers. And that the time of this Hall of Fame before it closes is actually just getting longer and longer as more and more guilds move out of the Alliance side of that column.
I suspect that it may be substantially longer this tier. That the Alliance Hall of Fame takes to close, just looking at some of the numbers for how many guilds that they have in the top, like where their top 100 lands is just not that close. Like, just what do they have? 11 guilds at 9 out of 10, whereas Horde has 110. And you're just like, okay, well, this is gonna take a hot minute. Kel'Thuzad, Fate Scribe, like Guardian, not exactly the most difficult bosses to get down, and then Sylvanas, like, with gear should be fairly quick, but even then it's just about getting the amount of guilds with players of that caliber that can take down Mythic Sylvanas to close the Hall of Fame to unlock Cross-Realm Mythic at that point. And I don't know, man.
I mean, the power spike is mostly over from shards as well now, right? The power spike was pretty concentrated in this first month. People are getting, rank 5 next week, and maybe they're getting their blood or frost, if that's better.
Yeah.
Over a little bit of a longer period, but still, I think it is, there was an acceleration as those shards came in, but I think we will now see a bit of a plateauing in player power level over the next couple weeks. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. It does bring up a couple questions, which I'm sure a lot of people have already put in the YouTube or Wowhead comments on this one, which are, is this even a problem? I think it is. I think it is a problem. I think that the problem here is like, first off, I think people should be able to play Alliance and also do high end PVE content, or just play the
with their
game.
friends.
Yeah, play the game, play Mythic Plus. I think that the way that the factions are separated is no longer serving the game in the way that it did back in Classic, right? There was a lot of good stuff that came back then because it was a very different kind of community in the game, right? You had these local server faction, identities, and you'd make a small group there, whereas now it's much more of like a regional community that I think
Well,
should be continued to be expanded.
you're friends with people. Okay, so like the reason that that has occurred is because back then you would be friends with people on your server and you would contact them in game or
Right,
largely in guilds. And
right.
now we're contacting people via Discord from all different aspects or walks of life, right? And you're like, you'll hit somebody up in Discord, be like, "Hey, want to do some keys today?" And they're not on your server, right? And so then you'll just invite somebody cross server, but they're on your faction, so you're able to play with them
Yeah.
regardless of that.
So I just think it's really unfortunate that if you want to play Alliance, you either are in this situation of you choose to play Alliance and you don't get those opportunities to play the game that way, which sucks because I think the game is really fun when played that
That
way.
sucks.
Or B, you're playing Horde because that's you want to play the game that way, and then you don't get to play Alliance. Alliance is cool. People should be allowed to play Alliance if they want to.
Dude, I wish I was a big purple moonkin.
I
I wish I could be a night elf.
All right, I take that part back. You're not allowed to change.
I would like to be a large purple chicken.
The other question is like, how could Blizzard go about changing this if they decided it was something they wanted to attack? We've already seen a couple of the incentives. The Hall of Fame system itself, the against overwhelming odds system has been used to try and push war mode balance towards more 50-50. Give Alliance incentive to do that. Some might argue that there's been some backfires there. Definitely Horde players that have jumped into the maw and found themselves surrounded by 40 Alliance players farming that that weekly.
That is an instant open up my tab war mode off. I guess
Yeah.
I'm never turning it back on this expansion. Good job.
But I think it's pretty clear that like these kind of little nudges aren't gonna do it. I also think that racials, fixing like changing racials in any way, like yeah, maybe you could look at Goblin Void Elf a little bit and make sure that those are evened out. But I don't think that there's a big racial disparity between the factions. I think really the solution to this is to ease the restrictions and make it so that you can raid or Mythic Plus with people of the opposite faction. I know there's, lore reasons that people have against that, but you can queue up for PvP and show up as the other faction. You can put on a little mask and show up on the other faction's starting zone in PvP. You can do RBGs and appear in the other faction's thing and be like race shifted. So I don't think it would be any more immersion breaking to PvE cross faction if we're allowing all this PvP, fudging of the line.
One of the things that you mentioned is like buffing the alliance racials as like a way that it could be managed. And while I do agree that that is a way that could be mitigated, I feel like you would probably see the same issue where it's like if you need the needle to shift from like Horde favored to alliance, you're going to push all of those guilds that are already on Horde. You should be like, well, I guess I have to go alliance. I don't really know it. Just all swap because it's like that much better. But I mean, right now, alliance racials are kind of just better.
Well, I think Goblin is the biggest racial that is out
Okay.
there right now.
Alliance racials are better for damage,
Yeah,
and we only see alliance teams in the MDI normally. Yeah,
yeah.
we've seen alliance teams only in the MDI
Ever
a
since they
while.
changed Blood Elf, basically. Yeah. And, well,
Yeah,
Siege of
exactly.
Bralis, because Siege of Bralis was a different dungeon between the two factions. That was cool.
Okay, aside from this, right? They're almost always night elf or alliance. Actually, they haven't even all been night elf recently, but anyways, they're all still alliance because the alliance racials are either the highest damage or they have some of the best utility for dungeon specific stuff. The alliance racials are very, very good. They just aren't good enough to make a whole entire faction of people transfer.
Yeah, and like
And I think you would just get the exact same thing except on the alliance side, honestly.
right, I think it's very hard to go from the imbalance to like actually bringing it back to balance. I think that much more likely you're either just not going to do enough to move the needle or you're going to flip it all the way, like you said, and that
Yeah.
just means collecting faction transfer fees from everybody, which
That
I don't know. I don't know if
that
that's the
would be-
move.
That would be an
Just milk
interesting
us every
Twitter.
patch, change the best faction, take another faction transfer out of all of us. Anyways,
Dude,
in
Gotta
that
get that WoW token.
On that dystopian image, we will leave you for this week. Hope you enjoyed this little discussion video. Let us know what you think in the comments, the wowhead comments down below. Always a great place to hear exciting opinions about stuff. Yeah, thanks for watching.
King's honor, friend.
Clown.
Just end the video with King's honor, friend.